Hello. So today we're going to talk about this is the third episode, I believe, in the Tradition series, and we're going to talk a little bit about how many cities to place on Tradition. Most stock standard Traditions builds are 4 or 5 cities, but making the distinction between the two is very important for setting up your game for success. How many cities to place on Tradition is the first Civ decision that you will make in a Civ game at any time, which is really kind of an early macro locked in decision making based on what other players are playing and based on how to read the map and the game state a little bit. It's the first time you'll actually have to make that sort of decision. So when diving into it, when you're thinking about your tradition city count, you're thinking about how wide you want to be in tradition. The first thing I always ask myself is like, what turn will I start my first wonder? What I mean by this is really how fast is my game? How quickly am I going to get my if I'm playing a 4 city build? How quickly am I going to be have my 4 settlers built and my granary built? Usually on 4 population, and starting that wonder whether that's Stonehenge or GL or whatever else you want to build. The real question is am I starting that before or after 29? Generally on these builds, if I'm playing fast and I'm playing a 4 city faster tradition build, I want to have my settlers done on turn 26. I want to have my granary done by turn 29. And I want to be showing that first wonder by turn 30. That's a pretty fast game. Sometimes you can play slower than that, and that's okay. Um, but it requires awareness and good map scouting and understanding if your neighbors are building what wonders and what they're doing. The second question I think when I want to say, do I want to play 5 here, right? It's generally the question. Generally, this decision tree looks a little bit like, I'm playing tradition. I built my 4 cities. Am I building a fifth? That's generally the thought process. So, and there's a couple things I kind of think about here. Are my expanse capable of roughly 15 pop by industrial and or 20 pop by modern? What that means is there good long-term growth on land, and are the cities themselves strong? If the cities are weaker, I'm generally inclined, because they don't grow as much, your tech is generally a little bit slower. And if they don't grow as much and your tech's a little bit slower, you're generally incentivized to place an extra city to help subsidize some of that total empire pop. Something to think about. You can also play, if the land's really fast and you're playing 4 cities, you can play for early kill. That works too at about expo timing or post unis. But this is getting into like a little bit more macro. But what you're set up to do in the game is dependent on these kind of decisions early. So understanding, how long can I scale on my land? Is settling an additional city for scaling good or necessary? If I want to sim for as long as I want to sim, all these are very important decisions. The next thing is what builds are other players playing. This is probably the most important thing when you're deciding 5 city tradition or a wider tradition. If your game is not the fastest game in the lobby, and if you're going to lose the wonders, or if there's a lot of trad players in the lobby and it's very risky that you get the wonders that you need for your game to succeed, it is generally incentivized that you build an extra settler and you play a little bit wider in order to kind of subsidize your game, because 5 city tradition is far less we're far more independent on wonders than 4 city tradition. 5 city tradition, you can have a pretty good game with building almost no wonders. So, or no wonders early, really before Renaissance. And then are there 3 or more inland tradition players? We kind of talked about that. So, going forward, we're going to dive into the builds. The first build is 3 city tradition. 3 city tradition does not scale. If anybody tells you that 3 city tradition scales, they are lying. I've seen some interesting tradition builds where people like. By the way, this whole video is going to be primarily for inland. On coast, you can play 3 city tradition. You can settle late. It's just I don't want to talk about coast. You can't kill fish. Coast sucks. Long and the short of it. Anyway, but 3 city tradition builds and inland really want GL. They really want to be fast, and generally they're playing for a fast expo timing. Now sometimes I've seen like skill planes and Ergo play a couple games that were really nice where they just settled 2 cities post NC anyway. They play 3 cities, they get all the wonders they want, and then they settle the cities. I haven't had much success, and I haven't really played around with it. But as far as I know, I've also seen Hawks play like kind of a tourism build on 3 city tradition. And the last thing, and maybe it can work, but long and the short of it is primarily an expo timing. It's primarily a fast, scary, early timing. Unless you're Austria and you can buy CS. Venice also has this ability now. So with their merchant, those are kind of the exceptions to the rule. So, but generally, you're not scanning land ships. If you're just simming on 3 cities, you're going to be here. So the other thing is when we sort of break down these actual good tradition builds, the 4 city, the 5 city, and actually the 6 city, um, it's they have a lot of distinctions. So the first 4 city build, 4 city generally wants early wonders. It wants fast libraries and fast NC, or NC being National College. It wants to hit unis really early after shops, so 67 to 72. Somewhere in that time frame with their workshops up is pretty good for this build. It generally doesn't like freedom because it has a hard time scaling in the long term, science wise, because it runs out of scientists. You can play some freedom, but you're generally not locked into. You're going to fall behind in atomic era. Autos. This is like the auto build. The quintessential auto build is a tradition build that scales into ideology, and then you start killing people. 4 city tradition is sacrificing demos for speed. You know, like it's very common on like tradition builds or 4 city tradition builds. You're like 4-5 or 5-5 in demos, so your demos are not better than everybody else's most of the game, but you're first in literacy, and that's what matters. You're first in technology the whole game. Timings are your friend with this, so you're going fast. You're not going as you're not as strong because but you're tall, you're fast, you're lean. You get to the military techs before everybody. Use your gold advantage to upgrade a bunch of units, and you kill them. That's generally how 4 city likes to play. Um, Also, 4 city is really generally playing for, early it's playing for Stonehenge or a great library into one of Petra or Oracle. That's generally the early build. Sometimes you pick up other wonders along the way, but generally those 2 wonders. Sometimes you get 3 of those wonders, which is cool. And then into Chichen. Chichen is almost always the. Ideally, you build NC before Chichen. Sometimes it's after, but you go into Chichen, and Chichen's usually your third or fourth wonder that you're building. 5 city tradition builds are a little bit different. Um, Generally, you are picking up whatever is available wonder wise, and you generally don't spam wonders early. So Chichen is not or a 5 city tradition is not a Stonehenge into Oracle kind of build. Maybe it is a straight Oracle. Maybe it is a Stonehenge and then a worker and then some other sim. But you need a lot more extra workers. So instead of being on about 8 workers, you need to be on 10, to really 10 to 12. But you have to build a lot of stables and water mills. Your NCs later. Your national college is usually in the 60s, usually post civil, because your last city is really slow to get that last library up. You have a lot of options for secondaries. You can even play Piety second is a lot more viable on 5 city than 4, in my opinion. If you get Oracle, Apo is a really fun 5 city. You're less dependent on Theo wonders for religion, although they're good, but you're less likely to get them. So it's just something to consider. But oftentimes on really good 5 city tradition games, you might be top demos, honestly. If you have a really good Petra or a really good hanging into Petra kind of 5 city tradition game, with a good culture panth, you can be top demos, and freedom is actually viable. Like if you're 5 city tradition and you have five spawning scientists, you can scale into info era on and still have scientists or still have a scientist. So you can get to nukes or you can get to stealth or wherever you need to go if you micro your scientists right and you play it right. Ciro would say 5 city tradition could go to space. Um, I'm yet to see a compelling fast 5 city tradition game that scales that long. It probably involves like straight labs and labs about 105. So, um, but it's not realistic most games. So city tradition is very different. 6 city tradition is you kind of are just simming. You don't really build wonders. You have to build a shit ton of workers. Yeah, you generally want to be on a strong culture path or a free demo civ. So free demo civs like Wales is really good for this. Belgium, Huns, anything that gives you a lot of extra advantage early to help you, catch up those extra cities. Uh, Really strong land really helps. I can't not settle this. Um, Expand settlers on this build are quite nice. I've had some 6 cities tradition builds where you have a fast early city and then you build a worker and then a settler out of that city, and that settler goes to a further location, and that's good. Um, your national college doesn't get up earlier. Your universities don't get up early. You don't get Chichen It's just it's a build that you have to be playing it in the right time with the right mindset. Um, that being said, this is kind of the over. This is kind of how these tradition builds vary, right? With the additional cities, you scale a lot more, but your game and your ability, your flexibility in your game, your flexibility to get what you want, the wonders you want, to shape your game the way that you want, decreases with the amount of cities that you place because your game is just overall slower. So let's dive into our games. So we have our 5 games: Greece, uh, Moors, Nubia, Greece again, and Babylon. I think are the games. We'll dive into my decision on how many cities to place on each one. So the Greece game is first. This Greece game is very interesting because, or it's actually not that interesting, if I'm completely honest, because there's no fucking space here. So I play 4 city tradition here. My game's really fast. You can see I have a settler down on turn 15. I built a shrine and a monument. So although you can see, turn 26 I'm done with settlers. I'm going to finish this granary on turn 29. I'm going to start my first wonder. Even though that's not the fastest in the world, it's still pretty fast. I mean, you have to consider that I have a shrine and I have a monument. So, and the reason that you build a monument on Greece is that you get the when you text writing, you get the free um, culture building. So, which I think I may already have here. I probably do already have writing here. So, but the reality is, you can just see the land. There's not much unless I'm going to kill the city states. It's really hard for me to get wider because of the bay and the way that it's shaped. I thought about settling on the other side of the bay, but it was just too far to be realistic. So, and these cities aren't particularly strong. This game was based off being fast. It was not based off, and I knew I was going to have to make a fast play on this game. Some fast plays on this game because this land quality is pretty weak. The next game is the Moors game. This is my land. This also, most of this land is pretty crappy, right? The bottom left is not really feasible to settle in any normal tradition city. South of that mountain maybe is a city or a coastal, but unless I'm planning a bunch of coastals, that city does not look strong enough for me to place. I know I have, you kind of hidden behind the chat here, I have a really nice city up in here. If you've watched other videos, you know I talked about how good harvest is here, and I just settle all the harvest tiles. So I settle, I think, touching tobacco. I settle, I think, on the ruin for the harvest tiles in here. And I settle another city up in here, a couple granary tiles, a stone, a couple luxes, I think a banana. So, a couple chops. And that's what I do. I settle 4 cities here because it's not that complicated. There's only 4 cities to be placed. It wasn't a decision. I also know on this start in particular, I know I want to be contesting Oracle. The reason I want to be contesting Oracle is because I'm on a demo path. I'm on uh, Harvest Festivals, and when you're on Harvest Festivals, generally you want to be playing Oracle. Oracle to get Oracle because it's as contested in some of these lobbies. Um, you generally want to play 4. You want to play a little bit taller. So I'm going to go Stonehenge and just start Oracle on turn 36, and the game's going to be good. The other thing is I know Daddy Cool to my right. He's not a phenomenal player. You know what? Daddy Cool is a he plays a lot, but some of his sim decisions are not always the best. But he's not someone that will just not build the wonders if you leave them around. So I don't want to kind of let Daddy Cool beat me to Oracle or beat me to anything, and I kind of want to seal the wonders this game. In order for me to do that, I know I have to play tall. I have to play 4 city. Uh, I'm gonna glance over the Nubia game. The Nubia game here. This game is fast. I'm right here. I'm actually growing. I'm taking Sun God next turn, but I'm gonna settle 1 more city. This copper area is not worth settling. Napata's good. Kerma's fine. This city's fine. 2 really strong cities, but the other ones are strong enough. There's not another city to settle. I'm kind of forced into trad, and I'm forced into playing pretty fast here, and I do. No one's in writing at this point. I'm gonna go this granary into GL. It's not the fastest game in the world, but it's fast enough. I go GL. I end up going GL Oracle, and my game is phenomenal. So it ends up working out because I get the wonders because I know I'm playing fast enough on this 4 city build, and the 5th city isn't strong enough for me to be compelled to place it. I'm actually gonna skip over the Babylon game briefly, but this is an example of a game where this game's slow as shit, right? I want to be if I haven't even started a settler yet and it's gonna be on turn 21. Um, So if I want to be starting my first wonder by turn 29, that's just not going to happen this game. Um, it is good to know, after building 3 settlers, it's good to know that I do have a granary up here. So I can go directly out of my settlers into a wonder, but still is going to be quite slow. And my cap's really efficient at building settlers, so I'm kind of inclined to build more of them. That being said, their land around me is really strong. I know I want to put a city up here on horse. I know I want to probably put a city somewhere over here for this wine area. I know I want to put a Petra city down, and I decide to put another city up here. I guess you can see it better on the last slide, but up here, kind of in this area. So I play a 5 city build here because I'm building my first wonder on turn 35, because I have to build that extra settler. Looks like I maybe built a worker in between here too before this wonder, so it's done on 33. But it doesn't matter. This is a great example of, I know I'm not going to be the fastest, but this land quality is very, very high. Like, look at all these harvest tiles. Look at the expand Petra. It's more important that I get the Petra in this expand this game, than and potentially hanging gardens in my capital, and I can potentially greed because I know what's going on in the map and no one else is contesting those. It doesn't look like anyone else is contesting those wonders. The only other tradition game, I believe this game, was Dwight on the coast, and he looked like he was contesting Colossus and other things. So I got this is a great example of, I had high quality land. I wanted to settle all of it, and I got away with still getting the wonders I want by settling that extra city. So the last thing I want to talk about a little bit is the Babylon game is a 6 city tradition game, and I want to talk about the Babylon game. The Babylon game is why I want to talk about this, because the Babylon game was awesome. So 6 city builds. Tradition is really the only tree. Well, you can play Piety on 4 or 5 city, but generally you're playing City of God, which is a profit planting religion, which is pretty slow, and the scaling's okay, but it's not the strongest build in the world. I think it's generally pretty weak. I've only played it a couple times in my whole Civ career because every time I play it, I don't have fun. Um, or Apostolic, which is the ultimate tempo uh, tempo build. Like Apostolic, you generally can get unis in the after shops in the early 60s, like 64. You can do with some consistency. You can get RD per pre-turn 90 on Apostolic. Um, anyway, the point is, these 6 city builds. There's 3 trees that you can kind of play 6 cities on: tradition, liberty, and piety, and they're very different. And they're very different in how they play, how fast they come online, how fast they are good, and also how well they scale. I'm going to start with Liberty because Liberty is the classic 6 city build, especially for new players. Liberty is extremely high tempo. You get this free settler, and you get this production towards building your settlers. And generally on 6 city builds, you're done building settlers on like turn 30. You're not building that many settlers. You're not building shrines and temples. You're settling all these really fast cities, but it's low scaling. There's no base food. There's no food multiplier in this tree. There's some base hammers, but there's not a lot of happy in Liberty. You have representation. It's low culture. It's low gold, but also the game's so fast that you're not very vulnerable early. And you have high wonder ability and expands as potential. When you play 6 city Liberty, one of my favorite moves is I play 6 city Liberty. I'm done making my settlers around turn 30. I'm a little bit behind tradition, 4 city tradition, but sometimes there is no 4 city tradition going GL. I'll go GL, and I'll GL into Oracle tech, and I'll build the Oracle on. I'll have a 46 Oracle, like a turn behind a Trad player on a 6 city Liberty build, and I just went GL Oracle, and I'm doing the Trad thing, but with 2 extra Liberty cities, and that's how fast I am. Liberty has that kind of explosive potential. If we go to Piety on the other end, 6 city Piety is totally different. So it is the lowest tempo. Shrines and temples are ear. That's funny. I made this slide a while ago. But shrines and temples are ear. You have to put, even if you put the discount in there, 26 plus 67 is, I don't know, it's just under 100 hammers. It's like 90 hammers, even at a discount. It's 45 hammers that you put into your first 2 buildings in every city you place, and it just feels bad. You don't get anything for free. You have high scaling because the religions you play, you generally play swords or indulgences with feed, and it feels pretty good. But generally you have pretty low happiness, and I think is pretty consensus. Part of it's because you don't get around because your game's so much slower. You don't get around to building your coliseums very quickly. Um, you have a lot more culture. You have you build your monuments and you have a culture on your shrines and your temples, and your province plants have some culture on it. So your culture scaling is actually pretty decent. It's a lot better than Liberty's, but you have extremely low early gold and but high long term gold, especially with things like tithe and other beliefs you can play on religion. But it's very high vulnerability and it's low wonder potential. So piety, you're not building any wonders, but you're extremely vulnerable earlier, but eventually you do scale. The reality is the other thing that I didn't put on here, which I really should mention. Six City Liberty has really fast tech. Tradition has pretty fast or fast-ish tech on Six City. Piety's tech is the slowest by far, especially early. You're hitting pretty late unis like 74, 75 unis, even on Six City builds. You can do it faster sometimes if you kind of build your early libraries and your game kind of goes the right way, but it's fluky. So the last one is the point of the video is tradition. Six City tradition, medium tempo. You get 4 free monuments and aqueducts, which is huge. They're buildings that you just don't have to build. You don't have to build any shrines and temples, so you're not throwing hammers away early. Um, your high scaling, you essentially have free. Tradition finisher is the equivalent of, or just a little bit worse than Swords in the Plowshare. So tradition finisher is 15% growth. Swords in the Plowshares is 1 food and 20% growth in this mod. So essentially, it's like you're playing discount swords in all your cities for free. You also have extra growth with Landed Elite and in the capital. But you're happy. If you have a culture path, you'll have decent culture. If not, I don't really know why you're doing this, honestly, but it is what it is. Generally, you have medium gold. It's medium vulnerability because you are faster than this piety, but you're much weaker than Liberty. And you have low to medium wonder ability. So the point being with this tradition, and I'm gonna talk about a little bit why you have some of those things is Liberty. You have all this tempo, but you need to convert it somehow. And generally, you need to convert it through wonders or just growing a lot really quickly or pushing really fast tech. Piety, you have a lot more scaling, but and it's really the highest scaling here, but your game's really slow. Tradition's kind of this medium between the two on the Six City, but you need a lot of things to go right, and your sim has to be good, and you have to know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing when you're playing Six City Tradition, it's kind of not worth it. And generally, a lot of starts that you initially click Tradition on, thinking you want to play faster, a 4 city or a 5 city, you don't generally think, yeah, I'm just going to build that extra settler. But it can be quite good. The other thing I want to talk about is the reason that this is especially broken is Landed Elite is a very good policy for your capital, so it makes your capital super strong with the 2 food and 10% growth in the capital. Monarchy is also insane, where every other pop in your capital is free, happiness-wise, and you have, I think, 1 gold for every other population in your capital. So every other pop you grow, you get a gold and in your capital, and also it doesn't count on happiness. So it makes your capital really strong and get big really quickly, especially when you think that you have the Landed Elite bonuses. And then the last policy is aristocracy, which means every 10th population in all of your cities is free. So what that means is that you essentially have all this extra happiness in tradition, where you can get a lot larger than you can on piety because you never hit a pseudo happy cap where piety does. And the other thing is your cities are bigger earlier on tradition rather than the piety. The downside is you don't get any of the great person buying, and you don't get any of the benefits of the faith and benefits of the religion. Now, what you can do on Six City tradition is just dip into piety later, and if you do that, that's where you really get the highest. You get a lot of the benefits from piety anyway, and you still get to scale. So that's where it is really really good. The thing about tradition and also some of these piety builds is they're relatively inactive in the game. They don't do much. So the reason I want to talk about this is I played a Six City Tradition game that was awesome. This game was just phenomenal, and a lot of things went my way. But when I decided so I thought this game is this Babylon game, and the land is pretty weak. It's not something I would be very comfortable clicking Tradition. And I was watching this back when I actually decided to play Tradition here, and I got like 4 tributes or 2 gold runes and 3 tributes. I had enough money to worker buy, or not worker buy, settler buy. So I bought a settler on turn 15. I haven't built a monument, and I don't know. Like, this is not a very good picture, but this is me almost clicking piety, and it's not. Jacob and John were in a call with me, and they were like, "Wait, you just bought a settler. What if you just play tradition instead, and you try to play really fast with the settler buy, like 4 city tradition, but you have an extra 5th city because you bought a settler?" And that's kind of what I did, except I built 6 cities. So I had an expanded settler to go for Lake Vic, or the settler I bought ended up running towards Lake Vic. I ended up going on that Tobacco North where that one is, and I ended up putting another city over here. I think I have more pictures of my overall setup. I do. This is it. And as you can see, these cities like are pretty weak. Babylon's a fine city. Akkad is a fine capital, but it's not particularly strong. Nippur is probably the best city I have because of all the stable tiles or the pasture tiles, and once you build a stable is good. This city's fine. The really strength of this is you get to get your cargoes up and grow really big with the bonuses towards growth in tradition. But honestly, like I think I have a picture of the last city I do. Sipar is shit as a 6th city. But the reality is, I'm done with settlers on turn 35. On 35, it looks like the settlers been out for 2 turns. The tempo of this game is just phenomenal. And it looks like I'm teching an Oracle tech here. I think I actually contest Oracle here, but not because I need it. We've talked about in other videos the good Pantheon here. That was the Culture Panth. I pushed a pretty fast Trad finisher and with the Culture Panth with all of the Ivory. And this game was just great. I end up, I don't know my uni timing. I think I have leaning on turn 80 this game with the Planted Scientist that I get when I get Philo, which really helps me push tech. And the whole point of, of this is like sometimes you can play outside the box. Nobody plays 6 City Shroud. That's what I'm going to say about 6 City Shroud. The people that play 6 City Shroud are like best bot when he's trolling, or Hawk sometimes, or maybe if Hoy was playing, Hoy would be playing 6 City Shroud. But there's not a lot of players that do this. This is not a stock standard build. It's not cookie cutter. But when you understand what these builds are trying to do, and when you compare it to 6 City Liberty or 6 City Piety and how they differ, and you understand that, you know, how the bonuses work and the differences, you can sometimes place that extra city and your game can still be insane. Now, most games are not going to be this Babylon game. This Babylon game was pretty obscure. But the reality with this land and this Babylon game is like 2 of these 6 cities are incredibly weak. Poor Sipa and this last city, Sipar, are not strong cities. They're not cities ever be comfortable settling if they were 2 of my 4 tradition cities. I'd be looking to play something else. And I thought I was playing Piety here to begin with anyway. But Civ and Civ 5 Lek is sometimes if you have your eyes open, you can kind of get games like this frequently, or relatively frequently, where you're doing something a little bit different because you're understanding all of the nuances of the different builds, and you're understanding when do I need to play fast, and when do I need the wonders, and when do I don't, and when can I afford to play a wider variant that scales more, and who are my neighbors, and you're understanding everything about the game that makes it so fun to play. People keep coming back to Civ because, you know, I played Tradition in 5 of these games, and the games all looked totally different. The secondary trees were different. The ways that I won the games or didn't win the games or lost the games were different. The ways that I interacted with my neighbors were different. You know, they all start with me clicking Tradition, but the games are incredibly different. And once I'm done with the series, I will post all of the games to YouTube. I think the Babylon game is actually on YouTube if you want to check it out. I think I put a rage bait title, and also it's one of my first recordings, and none of my audio is not in there, so my audio never got recorded, but it's a lot of fun. Anyway, the point is, this is the first macro that you do during the game, is understanding, can I place this 5th city or not? And a lot of it is understanding what your neighbors are doing and your plan for the game. It's very important to be thinking about these early, and this kind of provides an outline of when you can place an extra city, when you want to place an extra city. You know, some of it, as you've seen here, is pretty land restricted, and it's still most of the time thinking about playing your land. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and I hope everybody enjoyed the video.